My brother got my fiancée pregnant before our wedding. My family wants me to forgive them, but I told them to screw off and left for good. I never imagined my life would spiral into chaos like this. Everything seemed perfect. My fiancée, Emma, and I were preparing for the wedding of our dreams. Our families were involved, the venue was booked, and the future seemed like it was set in stone. But in a matter of days, everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and family would be turned upside down. The betrayal I experienced wasn't just from someone outside my circle, but from the two people I trusted the most, my brother and my fiancée. The damage they caused was something I couldn't overlook, no matter how much they begged for forgiveness. Here's the story of how it all fell apart. It started a few weeks before the wedding. The planning had been going smoothly, or so I thought. Emma and I had been together for 3 years, and we were living together in a small but cozy apartment in the city. I loved her. She was my best friend, my partner, and the woman I planned to spend the rest of my life with. Our families were close, too. Her parents were great, and my brother, Jake, had always been my closest confidant. We were like two peas in a pod, and I trusted him with my life. The wedding was set for the first weekend in May, and everything seemed perfect. We were both excited, but as the date got closer, I started noticing something off. Emma had been a little distant. Not distant in a bad way, but she wasn't as enthusiastic about the final touches as I thought she'd be. She was still happy about getting married, of course, but she seemed a little distracted. I brushed it off as pre-wedding nerves, who wouldn't be, but the real problem started when Jake began acting strangely. At first, it was subtle. He'd stop by the apartment less often, cancel plans, and seemed unusually preoccupied. I chalked it up to him being busy with work, but then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday night, and I was out with a few of my friends, having drinks at a bar. I'd invited Jake, but he declined. He said he was tired, which wasn't like him. He was always the life of the party, so I thought that was odd. Around midnight, I got a call from Emma. Her voice was shaky, almost like she was crying. "Hey, what's wrong?" I asked, my stomach twisting in an instant. "Can you come home?" she asked. I need to talk to you." I immediately left the bar and headed back to the apartment. My heart was pounding, my mind racing with all sorts of thoughts. When I walked in, Emma was sitting on the couch, her face pale. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't imagine what. "Talk to me, Em. What's going on?" She hesitated, then looked at me with a mixture of guilt and fear in her eyes. "I need to tell you something, and I don't know how you're going to react." I sat down beside her, trying to keep calm. "Whatever it is, we can figure it out. Jake and I, we've been seeing each other," she said, her voice barely a whisper. My brain couldn't process the words. "What?" She swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant, and it's his." The room spun. My heart stopped, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My brother, my own flesh and blood, had slept with my fiancée? And she was pregnant? It was like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to say, how to react, or what to do. My whole world felt like it was crashing down around me. I stood up, pacing the room. "How? When? Why? What the hell is going on, Emma?" She was crying now, her face in her hands. "It happened a few months ago. It was a mistake, a one-time thing, but I don't know how it happened. We never meant for it to get this." I could barely look at her. "How could you do this to me? How could you betray me like this?" "I'm so sorry, I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. We were both drunk and—" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. You and my brother? You betrayed me, Emma. You knew how important this wedding was to me, how important you were to me, and you did this anyway." I stormed out of the apartment, not knowing where I was going, but needing to get away. I ended up at a bar, alone, drowning my thoughts in whiskey. The whole situation felt unreal, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But it was real, and I had to face it. Over the next few days, I avoided Emma and Jake. I didn't want to see either of them, and I certainly didn't want to hear their apologies. My family tried to reach out, but I wasn't ready to talk. I needed space to process the betrayal. It felt like my whole life had been a lie, like I had been living in a fantasy, and now the harsh reality was setting in. Then, one evening, I got a call from my mom. She asked if we could meet, and despite my anger, I agreed. I needed answers, and I knew she could give them to me. When I arrived at her house, I was met with my entire family, My mom, dad, and Jake, along with Emma. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom looked at me with concern. "We wanted to give you time to process, but your brother and Emma need your forgiveness. This is a family matter, and we need to move past it." Move past it? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How can I move past this? You're asking me to forgive them for what they've done to me, what they've done to our family, and just pretend it didn't happen. Jake stepped forward, his face a mix of shame and defiance. "Look, I know I messed up. I'm sorry. But I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, man." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. His words didn't matter. They were just noise, like a broken record spinning in circles. I had heard every possible apology and excuse in my head over the past few days, and none of them made a damn difference. There was no magic apology that could fix this. There was no excuse that would undo the damage. "Sorry?" I spat the word out, the anger in my voice barely contained. "You're sorry? You're sorry for what? For sleeping with my fiancée? For betraying me in the worst way possible? You think a simple sorry is enough?" Jake shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. He ran a hand through his hair, but there was nothing genuine about his apology. It was a desperate attempt to absolve himself of the guilt. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sorry for what he did to me, he was sorry because he got caught. And that was the part I couldn't stand. "Look, man," he said, his voice shaky now, "I know this looks bad, but it was a mistake. It wasn't planned. I didn't think it would go this far. We were both drunk, and it was just a one-time thing. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "That's your excuse?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "You were drunk? You're telling me that you can't control yourself when you're drunk? That's the excuse you're going to give me after you destroyed everything?" Jake looked down, his shoulders slumping. He didn't have an answer. There was no good explanation, no justification. There was nothing he could say that would make it better. I felt a cold rage bubbling inside me, a mixture of betrayal and disgust. Emma, standing beside him, finally spoke up. "I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake. Please, don't throw away everything we had over one moment of weakness." I turned to her, and for the first time since I found out, I looked at her with nothing but contempt. "One moment of weakness?" I repeated, incredulous. "This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some one-time slip-up. This was deliberate. You made a choice. You made a choice to sleep with my brother. And now you're standing here, asking me to just forgive you?" Her face twisted in pain, but there was no sympathy in my heart for her. None at all. "I was confused," she continued, her voice faltering. "I was confused about everything. I was under a lot of stress, and when Jake and I were together that night, it just happened. I didn't think it would go this far." I took a deep breath, my hands shaking from the anger that was threatening to overtake me. "You think I care about your excuses? You think I care about how stressed you were? You've ruined everything. You've ruined me. You've ruined us. And now you want me to just forget about it because you're confused?" She opened her mouth to say something else, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't. I had heard enough. I turned to my mom, who had been silently watching the exchange. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, my voice cold. "You knew what they did. You knew they betrayed me, and you didn't tell me." She flinched, her eyes flickering with guilt. "We didn't want to hurt you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We thought you needed time to process it, to understand it. It's not easy, and we thought if we gave you some space, you'd come around." I shook my head in disbelief. "Space? You thought I needed space? How about honesty? How about you telling me the truth from the beginning instead of letting me walk around in the dark, thinking everything was fine? You let me prepare for a wedding that was built on lies." My dad, who had been standing quietly by the door, finally spoke up. "Son, we understand how hurt you are. But you need to understand that family is important. This is your brother. This is Emma. They made a mistake, and now they're asking for your forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You want me to forgive them? After everything they've done? After they destroyed my life? You're asking me to forgive them?" Jake stepped forward again, his voice urgent. "Look, I get it. I know I fucked up. I know what I did was wrong. But I'm asking you, as your brother, to forgive me. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Your apology means nothing," I said, my voice cold. "It's too late for apologies. It's too late for forgiveness. You've already destroyed everything. You've already taken everything from me. What's left for me to forgive? There was a long silence. No one knew what to say. My mom and dad exchanged looks, unsure of how to proceed. Jake looked defeated, his face pale, and Emma just stood there, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't care less. I turned my back to them, unable to look at their faces anymore. I'm done. I'm done with all of you. You've ruined everything, and there's nothing left to fix. I can't look at you the same way. I can't forgive this. I walked toward the door, my hands trembling with the intensity of my emotions. I'm leaving. Don't contact me again. I don't want to hear your apologies. I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want anything from any of you. Before anyone could respond, I was out the door, slamming it behind me. The cold air hit my face as I stood on the front steps, taking a deep breath. My heart was pounding, my chest tight with rage and sorrow. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know where to go. But I knew one thing, I couldn't stay here. Not with them. Not in a place that felt like a lodge. I got into my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away. I needed to be alone, away from the people who had betrayed me, away from the life that had been shattered by their actions. I didn't care where I ended up. I just needed to escape. I drove for hours, the road stretching out before me like an endless void. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, of what could have been, of what I had lost. The wedding, the life I had planned, all of it was gone now. I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't go back to them. The only thing I knew was that I had to keep moving forward. No matter how painful it was, no matter how hard it seemed, I had to leave it all behind. There was nothing left for me there. Not anymore.